begin the webcast today with a brief introduction of our panel members and a few open poll questions. Our webinar today features Bill Jerome, who's the VP of Product and User Experience here at Acrobatiq. We were going to have Sandy Raysor with us, who's a learning engineer with us at Acrobatiq, but unfortunately she's sick today, so Bill's going to be taking over her part of the panel presentation. But we're delighted, in addition, to have Dr. Marie Norman, Senior Director of Educational Excellence at Acrobatiq. Acrobatiq and Acrobatiq are sister companies, both owned by CMU, both fueled by the science of learning. Acrobatiq uses analytics to measure and improve student learning, and Acrobatiq helps universities develop and deliver high-quality online programs. Our goal for today's webinar panel is to give you some essential information about the types of analytics and tips on how you might use analytics in the classroom to increase your own effectiveness. There are many categories of tips we could explore with our panels, like assessment, engagement, course prep, etc. And we're actually going to be hosting more panel Q&A webcasts on those topics with our learning engineers in the months ahead. So look for invitations to those in your inbox. But today is about giving you a few tips from Bill and from Marie about online course analytics and their use. First, a little bit about Bill Jerome. He's a computer scientist whose passion is connecting with the human user, developing easy-to-use systems capable of real good in the real world. Bill joined the Open Learning Initiative at CMU in its earliest days is considered a founding member. And we also have Dr. Marie Norman. She's a co-author of the book, How Learning Works, 7 Research-Based Principles for Smart Teaching, which distills learning research into practical strategies for classroom teaching. She's taught anthropology for over 20 years at the University of Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon University, and served for many years as the Associate Director of the Eberly Center for Teaching Excellence at CMU. Dr. Norman is currently the Senior Director of Educational Excellence at Acrobatiq, a CMU-based company with an innovative platform and process for helping faculty develop and deliver high-quality online courses. And I'm going to get things moving forward and hand the presentation over to Bill Jerome, who's going to talk with you a little bit today about the differences in the types of analytics.
All right, thank you, Sharon. So I just wanted to spend maybe 5 minutes going over a breakdown that we at Acrobatiq use to think about different kinds of analytics in educational data. And actually, before I get into the graphic that's on the screen here, one thing that I think is worth noting is that analytics are inevitably dependent upon the data that they work upon. So as I walk through these 3 different kinds of analytics that we think about, it's important to know that the kinds of data that are required for these different analytics are different. And I'll talk about that a little bit at the end, but I felt like it was important to say that up front, that the data that you have very much informs the kind of analytics you can create. So here what we're looking at is one possible breakdown. There's all kinds of ways to break out learning analytics, and in fact, if you look at the marketplace and research and sales pitches, you'll hear all kinds of different things. So this is just the way that we find useful to think about it. I'm going to start at the right, which is institutional analytics. So institutional analytics, sometimes you might hear these called progression analytics, are really, they might not even require online components, but an institution will, when they build a curriculum, track students as they move through it. So you want to find courses that students who are successful through the program start to have difficulty on, and identify problem courses so that you can intervene on those courses over the coming years and semesters to make sure that you're providing an experience that your students are successful in. And so that's what we think of as institutional analytics, and this is really very correlational. You're looking at broad swaths of students moving through programs as a cohort, and then making some analysis over that and identifying courses where students are struggling or of course succeeding. So knowing that a course is a stumbling block is really important, but it's also worth noting that this has a long time horizon. You have to wait for a whole cohort of students to move through big chunks of a program before you have enough data at your institution to start analyzing that in a more meaningful way. In the middle, we have engagement analytics. Now, this is one that you can think of as what almost any kind of a platform that's delivering online content can offer you. Here we're looking at patterns of student usage where students are engaging with online materials. Now, what engagement means can vary quite a lot depending on the platform you're using, but these are the kinds of things like when do students log in, how much time do they spend in the platform, how many of the resources are they accessing. Now, actually, there's a long discussion that can be had about what does it mean to know time on task in a web-based environment where there's data that says a student can have 18 tabs open at once. That's for some other panel or just another conversation at some point. But that's what we were talking about when we're thinking of engagement. What's the kind of data we get just by knowing that students interact or don't interact with our online resources? And this can be really effective. There's some great analytics work being done in this space where you can identify students who look like the profiles of other students who have either failed or dropped out. So this is a way that in real time you can identify students who are at risk. So as opposed to waiting for a whole cohort of students to move through a course, leave it, and then make some determinations about the course, here you can actually intervene with a student who's currently enrolled in a course. Typically this takes the form of notifying a faculty member or, depending on the institution, a tutor or a mentor that, hey, this student looks like they're at risk. Now, we put it in between causal and correlational because while we might be drawing some strong correlations and there may be some underlying causal reason that this student might be at risk, we don't know what that is. All we can tell the student or instructor is, hey, we think you need to intervene with this student. They look like students who, for reasons we don't understand, have dropped out in the past. So they're not armed with any more detailed information, but it's still really valuable to alert faculty or mentors that they should be intervening with a student. So that's what we think of in that middle box as engagement analytics. Finally, on the left is where we feel learning analytics really come into play. So this is where we're trying to really look, in particular here at Acrobatiq, at the causal end of what's going on with students. So by identifying students who are interacting with content that is tagged to skill graphs and learning objectives, we can actually get a better understanding of what students are learning. And so we're not looking at, are they engaging with resources? We're saying when they engage with those resources, what are they learning and where are they struggling? So this not only helps us identify students who are struggling, but it can also give us explanation. It's an explanatory way to look at why a student is struggling, where we can say, these are the areas in which your students are having difficulty. So this could be at a classroom level, which you'll hear more about when I turn this over to Marie. But you could say at a classroom level, what are the things that my students are struggling with that I as an instructor should spend my time focusing on? Or as for an individual student, a tutor could come in and look at the work that that student's doing, and those learning analytics could say, here's the misconception that your student has, or here are the areas in which your student's struggling that you need to help them with. So it's much more diagnostic, and that's why we put it on the causal end. We're really getting underneath of it and saying, what is it that the student is struggling with? So as a brief summary, here's how we can think about the data that's collected for each one of these. So if we start back on the right with those institutional analytics, you need a relatively small amount of data per student. And typically this is data that institutions are already collecting. Whether or not they're doing it in an online or efficient way, might be a question, but more and more, this is moving into student information systems at universities where you're saying, okay, what are the students enrolled in? What were their outcomes, what were the grades essentially on those courses, and that gives you that. And so what can you do with that? You can red flag courses or sequences within a program that need attention. So that's sort of the right-hand side. Not a lot of data needed, but you get these growth, high-level analysis that you can perform over time. Moving back towards the middle at engagement analytics, the volume of data is much larger, but most online systems that are being used to offer online resources already collect a lot of these basic metrics. Students have accounts, so the system knows who they are, when they come in, how long roughly they spend in the platform, what are the resources they're accessing, what are their clicks. So a lot of that, it's a lot more data and requires much more refined analysis, but it's also part and parcel of a whole lot of platforms out there. And this gives you some student activity measures, but it's not learning measures, it's activity. And you can use this to identify at-risk students, which, again, I think is an extremely valuable thing to be able to do. And then moving again to the left, we're capturing more data, and there's more data input into learning analytics than there is engagement analytics. Here you need to know something about the content, and you need to know something about the correctness of the interactions that students are making with the system. But once you have that, in Acrobatic, we can accurately predict each student's mastery in a subject down to the skill level based on a lot of information about an individual's success, where their guesses are, where their failures are, whether or not they remedy those failures through their interaction with that content. So that's sort of an outline of the different data needs across these different kinds of analytics. So I'm going to take that sort of high-level view and move into a few practical points that you can employ in the classroom that might be valuable to you. And I will say that Sandy is the learning engineer. She's the one who does the work on the ground. So I'm doing my best to fill her shoes here. But one thing that you want to think about is what's that kind of data you want. If we're talking about these three kinds of analytics, where is it that right now might be most valuable to you? And in fact, at different institutions, they will place a different emphasis on those kinds of analytics. Maybe it's question of data collection, but thinking about those helps you refine your questions that you want to answer with data. Staying online is actually important. It's really critical that you can record data about students' interaction with the learning resource. This is actually, I'm just going to take a quick side here, but in a practical sense, one of the questions we have been asked at OLI and also at Acrobatic is about printing out materials. And one thing that we can say is we've studied this. We actually did a study and said, if you print out interactive materials, your learning outcomes go down. Because it's that interaction and rich feedback that's really important to students. And then on our side, we can analyze, since we know what those interactions are, we can analyze that data and report it back to faculty or even the course designers. So staying online is really important, or moving online with your courses is a good way to go. Rome was not built in a day. It's okay to start moving things online. Everything doesn't have to go all at once, but the more you can start moving online, the better. Student-centered measurable learning objectives are critical to what we do at Acrobatic, and they're also critical to, I think, good course design. Marie can speak to that maybe a little bit, putting her on the spot. But also it's what helps us use that data. So because these learning objectives that we define are measurable, we can more clearly tie the interactions that a student has with the content to the data and the skill graph for that course. So if we're very precise about how we measure student success learning objectives, then we can create these interactions that are actually targeted at measuring those things. Practice should cover all aspects of a learning objective. This is something that I'll just do a quick little dive here into an example. So you might have a learning objective that says a student will be able to calculate the volume of a rectangular prism. And that sounds like a perfectly reasonably precise learning objective, but there are also a lot of ways in which a student might be able to demonstrate mastery. And there are a lot of components to this learning objective. So a student must know what a rectangular prism is. They must know the equation for doing the calculation. There's arithmetic here. They have to be able to multiply correctly. And the student has to understand how to do calculations with units. So there are a number of aspects to this learning objective, and it's really a good idea to write interactions and questions that address all of these, because that helps you get at misconceptions. So I might find out that a student is struggling with how do they calculate the volume of a rectangular prism, but through data, if I'm asking these 4 different kinds of questions, for example, I can then identify which of these things a student might actually be struggling with. It's not that they're having perhaps trouble with the concept, but they're having trouble with units, so that you know where to go in and target your remediation on that particular objective. And finally, using good distractors. I mean, again, these last two in particular, these are just good course design. They happen to make it easier to collect all that data and make these learning analytics work. But they're also just good course design. Using good distractors to target those misconceptions is also a really good idea. And so one point that I want to make is that, you know, is being able to use these analytics, give them to whoever's teaching or working with or tutoring a student who's working with these resources, and enable them to use better practices in their teaching. So to talk more about that, I'll go ahead and turn this over to Marie.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody. I hope you can all hear me clearly, and thank you, Bill, for setting the table there. I teach cultural anthropology. I've taught for about 20 years, and unfortunately, Acrobatiq does not have an anthropology class. I wish it did. But if there was one, I wanted to talk a little bit about how I would use it. And this is the only way to use it, but it's one example of how you can incorporate these kinds of analytics into a course, either online or face-to-face. So one of the things I think I would do is to review the dashboard, the learning dashboard, before class. I would take a look at whether students are engaged, whether they're doing the activities, for one thing, but also how they're doing. So I would look at the learning objectives and see what students are getting right, what they're getting wrong, where they seem to be struggling. And then I would I would identify those areas in particular where students seem to be having trouble. Say they're having a difficult time distinguishing the median from the mean or something like that. And then I would focus my planning on developing activities that address those areas. So I would think about how to explain it more clearly, what kinds of clarifications I could provide, what sorts of examples would help students really understand that issue better. Are there cases, are there questions, are there activities that students could do in class that would help them really get that thing that they're missing? I think I would also, before class, is ask students to check their own dashboard and to see for themselves where they're doing well and where they're not doing so well, and to bring questions to class. Now, when I say class, I'm including in that synchronous live sessions in an online class. So any place within an online class where you have some flexibility and ability to respond to students. You could also create little videos or audio explanations targeting these issues where students are having trouble. So those are other options for online environments. So that's what I would do before class. Then I would think about what to do during class. So one of the things I think I would try to do is to share this information with students. So I would pull the data, the dashboard up on screen and show students where they seem to be doing well, where they don't seem to be doing well, and ask them, does this match your sense of where we need to focus in this class? And I'd spend just a little bit of time double checking their understanding in those areas where the data shows that they're strong. So I wouldn't necessarily spend a lot of time on that, but I might do some clicker questions or review questions to make sure that students really do get those things that the data shows that they do. And again, I would focus a lot of what I do in that class on providing active learning opportunities in the areas where students appear weak. So more opportunities to practice or discuss or apply the information, to use it actively so that they learn it deeply. And then I would encourage students, while they're there with me, to use the dashboard themselves, to really pay attention to what they're learning and how they're learning and what's working and not working about the ways that they're studying, as a way to build metacognitive skills and to get students to take responsibility for their own learning, and to encourage them to come to me for help if they are having trouble in any particular area. So in addition to looking at it before class and going over it with students in class and using it to adjust and refine what I would do as a teacher, I would also use this data to periodically sort of check in and see what sorts of patterns are appearing. So let's say I have students from a lot of different majors in my class. I might want to look and see how they're faring. Are students from particular majors having a harder time? Do they need a little additional assistance, maybe because they lack some prior knowledge? So I'd look for those patterns, and I'd also just look to see which students seem to be struggling and identify individuals and reach out to them just to say, you know, hey, it seems like you're not doing many of the activities, or you are, but you are having trouble with them. How can I help? Or to point them to some of the resources on campus that they could avail themselves of. But the other thing is, I wouldn't just look for students who are struggling. I'd also look for students who seem to be acing it easily, and to try to find additional challenges for them, maybe additional problem sets or questions that would get those students who seem to be sailing through the material to give them a little bit extra meat. So those are some of the things I could imagine doing periodically. Some of the general benefits that I see to using analytics to inform your teaching are these: that it allows you to be, first of all, more responsive. So responsiveness, I think, is important. And I think students really appreciate this. When you say to them, I'm paying attention to what you understand and what you don't understand, and I really want to focus on the areas you need most. Another benefit, I think, is that you can really focus your instruction and provide more time on task in the areas where students need it most. Why spend a lot of time going over things they already get if you could put that time and attention into the areas that they really don't understand and really do need a little bit of extra help? And provide, and this is the third bullet, targeted practice in those areas. So ways for them to use that material over and over again until they really get it deeply. One of the major advantages, I think, to having these kind of analytics is, from students' perspective, to help them think about themselves as learners, to really start to ask themselves, what helps me learn, what doesn't help me learn, and to be more actively engaged in their own learning. So I think it can improve their metacognitive skills. It provides opportunities for us as instructors to provide more differentiated instruction. So, you know, to give students of different levels exactly what they need: more help, more challenge, whatever it happens to be. And to intervene early, to pay attention to these patterns and intervene with students before they get hopelessly overwhelmed or lost within a course, so that they know, and I think this is especially important in online courses where students can feel disconnected, so they know you're paying attention to them and care about their learning. So those are some of the ways, and I'm sure those of you who use analytics now have many other ideas about how to use this kind of data in your own teaching. So those were some ideas, and with that, I think Sharon will take over again.
Yes, I do, and thank you. Thank you, Marie, and thank you, Bill, and thank all of you for obviously being here and taking part. I see the questions rolling in, and as you know, we gave you an opportunity to submit questions when you registered for our webcast, and Peter Campbell from Blackboard registered for our webcast and submitted a couple questions that we'd like to address before we get into the general Q&A. And one was, how might your analytics engine dashboard work with the Blackboard courses? And then, of course, you can see the second question, which is, what is the status of your SaaS enterprise version of the learning dashboard? And I think I'll hand this over to Bill Jerome for now to give us kind of his answers to these questions. Go ahead, Bill.
Sure. So for the first question, how can our engine and dashboard work in the context of a Blackboard course? So when we design, at Acrobatiq specifically, when we design courses, we create whole experiences, and we think that one of the benefits to that is to have a student not have to spend metacognitive effort on thinking about, do I need to worry about this asset here or that asset there, or piece together different learning resources. So we have a very sequential experience where a student comes in, they'll read a couple of paragraphs, maybe watch a 2-minute video, and then immediately start interacting. And so one of the things that we never built at OLI, and is also the way we're proceeding here at Acrobatiq, because there's a lot of tools for managing a course that go around that. There's a lot of roster management, there's grade books, there's homework submission, discussion forums, and that's not something we do. And so what we do is we provide the capability for institutions and faculty to embed Acrobatiq courseware within an LMS, a learning management system like Blackboard. So our courses can and have been embedded within Blackboard. They can be embedded within Moodle, whatever is what's the right thing to do at your particular institution. And that includes the dashboards. So the students can log in through their LMS and have an experience, as well as access to all the support tools that are about the management of a course. And the instructor has access to that as well, and that's how they get to their dashboards. For the second question, our SaaS Enterprise version of the Learning Dashboard. So for those who might not be familiar with SaaS is software as a service, and we're investigating ways to sort of break apart the learning dashboards in our analytics engine from the delivery platform, from the content side. So from an architectural point of view, we've already done this. This is something that we began as a company when we started right away. And so we've completed that piece, and we have a couple of key partnerships that we're currently involved with where we're beginning to do this. So we're essentially deploying our analytics engine outside of our own courseware and integrating it with other courseware. And we're using those pilots as an opportunity to investigate what other kinds of features and capabilities we'll need to support in order to make this sort of a more broadly available functionality. So right now we have a couple of pilot projects going on with some key partners, and we hope that will give us some good information about what that more public software as a service learning dashboard ought to look like. I'm happy to have some offline conversation about that if someone's interested.
Thank you, Bill. That's perfect. I appreciate that. And let's move into kind of our general Q&A. Again, thank you all for submitting questions. I'm going to start picking them out now and kind of directing them to both of our panelists. One of the first ones, and I think this is just, I'm going to do this one first from Sam, and I just want to make sure, just so we repeat it for Sam's sake. And it says, how can I integrate Acrobatic with Moodle 2.6? And I think this is pretty much what you were talking about with Blackboard, but I'm just going to let you hit that again real quick, Bill.
Sure. So we use a thing called LTI, which enables us to do single sign-on essentially with any of these LMS providers. Moodle's one of them. So if you're using an Acrobatic course, there are actually a couple of ways to do this that just depend on whether or not you've built the course already or you're going to hold off until you've integrated with Moodle. And so that's something that if you take a look at our support site, you'll find answers to how to do that.
Very good, thank you. So now there's a question that came in from Leslie, and I will read this one out. It says, even though I have explained the dashboard, my students don't spend the time to even check them, much less use them to evaluate their learning. So I'm considering giving them specific written assignments that push them to be more metacognitive about what they know. Do you have any other suggestions for me? So let you guys chew on that for a second, kind of putting you on the spot, but do either of you have any other suggestions for Leslie?
Sure, I'll jump in with a quick answer and let Marie formulate the real answer. So there are a couple. There are a couple of ways in which we do this when we're designing an acrobatic course. So this is an excellent question. So one of the things that we do at the end of each module is we actually ask students, so we tell them what their objectives are as they're going to work through a module, and for your purposes, think of that as a homework assignment or a week's worth of work. Here are the objectives that we expect you to learn through this material. At the end, even though we have a learning analytics engine that's pretty advanced and is looking at all those interactions, and for each student getting a model of what their mastery is on those learning objectives, we ask the students at the end to self-report on a scale of 1 to 5 for each learning objective what their confidence level is. And we actually have some pretty specific language about, we don't just say 1 through 5, it's I couldn't do this at all, I could do it, if I had the book in front of me, or I really can do this all on my own, that kind of a thing. And then so that gets them thinking about, could I really do this? Let me look at these things I'm supposed to be able to do, and how do I feel I can do them? One of the beauties of doing this online is if you sum up those results for your class, if you have a classroom experience, you can actually, like in an acrobatic course, say, here's how you as a class are performing against these objectives, and this is how you as a class feel like you're performing against these objectives, and that can be really powerful. It's one way for students to, sometimes they will, in fact, underestimate themselves, and you can say, well, actually, as a class, you're really getting this to the level you need to get it here, and then, of course, there will be cases where they're overestimating their confidence. But the more that they're exposed to that, where you can compare and contrast that, the better they'll get actually at being able to judge their own capabilities.
Well, Bill, I think you gave a tremendous answer. I think that's a great idea. I love the idea of comparing how they think they're doing against how they're actually doing, because I think that can really help to build those metacognitive skills. And the person who sent the question, I'm sorry I can't see the name here, but
that was Leslie.
Leslie, yeah. I support your idea of requiring a short written reflection assignment periodically that asks students to reflect on how they're using that material, what tends to help them learn, what they could do differently. You know, to give them a structured kind of reflection about how they're using it and how they might use it better. My guess is they will not do this kind of metacognitive exercise unless they're required to, and I think it's very helpful for them to do it. But I'd keep it short so that it doesn't add a lot of work for them, but gets them to periodically think about how they could be doing this differently. Maybe they're going through the course with the television on and the radio blaring, or, you know, things that distract them or keep them from focusing while they're doing it. They're you know, maybe they're clicking through answers without actually really trying to solve the problem. If you can prompt them to think about how they might actually be doing it and how they might get more out of it, I think that would be very helpful.
Great, thank you, Marie, and thank you, Bill. Leslie says thank you as well. I'm going to move to a question from Young, and Young says we're currently using some OLI courses at our institution. I think we've heard this before, Bill. What Young would like to know is, are there new features that we should be aware of with some of the things that we're seeing in acrobatic courses?
Yes, so actually that depends. It varies on the courses. So there are some courses where we've done some content revision. So psychology would be an example where the OLI course was using the DSM-4, and so we've gone through and updated that course to be using the DSM-5. Our biology course is actually undergoing a really significant revision, both in we've added some interactive lab exercises, but there's actually a whole lot of cool work going on there that's in a prototype phase right now, where we're building up some synthetic assessments and actually some adaptivity that's actually responding to student learning data. There are other across the board kinds of things that we're implementing. So coming this year will be a new platform for delivery that is responsive. So it works on your desktop, your tablet, your phone. We are essentially on a search and destroy mission for Flash, and in most of our courses we've already done a significant amount of work to eliminate Flash requirements, which of course is part of what we need to do for tablet and phone accessibility, specifically Apple devices. And we're going to be overhauling the interface on the dashboard. And it's a little bit, if you've been using the OLI courses, it can be a little clunky to get around module by module. And we're actually moving it to be more of a sort of a question-based interface so that you can say, here are the things I'd like some answers to, and we just give you the right displays rather than requiring you to drill all the way down. So there's a lot of work coming, but right now I would say there are course-specific enhancements that are already out there in most courses. Statistics, psych, bio all come to mind. A&P is getting a significant revamp, and that'll be available this summer as well. But then there's a new platform coming this year that will take care of a whole lot of accessibility issues, and we'll also have some new features, some of which I almost don't even want to say anything about yet, but there's some cool stuff coming.
Very good. Thank you, Bill. I have another question here from Peter that says, can you give, this is interesting, yeah, I think this is good. This is a good question. Can you give examples of how mastery could be demonstrated in a domain that's not necessarily procedural? I think some of our examples were a little bit more around the math kind of area, but possibly like for psychology. And I know you haven't been obviously directly on the learning engineering for that, Bill, but I'm wondering if you can dig in and kind of think about how we handle some of that stuff in psychology and pull that out. Nothing like putting you on the spot there, but.
Yeah, so it's unfortunate that we don't have Sandy today. But yes, psychology, I think, is a great example of a course where we're not looking at procedural. There's a lot of categorization work that we do in psychology. So we have these activities where you're categorizing things. We actually did a pilot project at OLI that I think is part of it's going to see its way into some acrobatic courses in English composition. And that was really interesting because to that point, when we started with statistics and logic. And, you get a lot of people who would say, well, sure, that's easy, but now what? So we have a lot of experience in foreign language, for example.
Bill? Okay, I think Bill might have faded out just a little bit on us there.
If Sharon, if you'd like, while we wait to get Bill back, I can do my best to answer this question, which I think is an interesting one.
Why don't you jump in? That'd be great.
Sure. So psychology is getting kind of close to my field. So I think this is an excellent question. I think that some of what mastery involves, at least at lower levels, is students' ability to define terms or distinguish concepts. Say the difference between negative reinforcement and punishment. The ability to kind of identify the features of a particular developmental stage, so that a lot of the kinds of questions that could be baked into a course like that would involve students' ability to recognize and articulate the differences between key disciplinary ideas, especially in a survey level psychology course.
All right, good. Thank you. I'm not sure if Bill's back yet. I know he kind of fuzzed out on us there. Okay, so we're gonna scale back from Bill kind of questions there, and I wanted to say we got a couple thank yous here from a couple folks that had submitted some questions. We do have kind of another question here from, and this might be one that's more for Bill, and I think maybe we might have him back. Are you back, Bill? Nope. Well, we'll see what we can get here. Another question here is that what are some of this one came in from Julie. What are some of the key measurements of student interactions that are taken into your model? And I know that I think we're kind of getting Bill back on, but in our model, most of the data that we bring into the learning dashboard is all brought in via the different interactive exercises that we have throughout the courses. And they ask questions of the student that tie directly to the learning objectives and therefore feed the learning dashboard and allow you to see kind of what the student is able to do, what hints the student takes, and then it feeds into the learning model and obviously produces an assessment of their understanding of those learning objectives. So if I don't have Bill back on, and I don't think I do, I'm just going to jump to another question. Okay, and I'm scrolling through them here as they have come in. And I will grab another one. There's a question about if you can get a copy of this webcast, and it will be coming out to all of you, if not later today, tomorrow early. It sounds like we have one more question here, and it says, can we create acrobatic courses ourselves, or do we have to submit our class content to your team and have them do it for us? It sounds like I have Bill back.
I think I'm back.
Okay, yeah, it sounds like you might be back.
You're back, Bill.
Did you catch that last question about creating acrobatic courses ourselves, or do we have to submit class content to your team and have them do it for us? And I'm going to tell you what, before you answer that, I'm going to combine that with another question. That one was from Sam, but another one is from Lisa. And it says, do you have any plans to work with institutions to develop new classes? And I think these two questions are related, Bill, so I'm going to allow you to answer them together.
So I'll handle the second one first, which is yes, absolutely, and that's something we're already doing. So we have a couple of partner institutions that we're working with and developing courses with them. So that's definitely a yes and a possibility. And it is not the case at the moment that anyone can visit Acrobatiq and create their own courses, although one of the things that we're doing is developing a suite of authoring tools that would allow such a thing. So at OLI, we didn't have any kind of a way for visual editing to occur or activities to be created. And so we're actually internally beginning to use some tools that we're developing, and we're going to build those out so that we have the capability for others to come in and use the platform and create content. And part of the reason we're taking our time with that is we think it's really important to embed good learning design into the tools. So it would probably be pretty easy for us to just sort of turn on a WordPress style editor and allow people to create content, but we really want to make sure we're emphasizing activity development and good learning design and the ability to tie things to learning objectives in a way that isn't cumbersome. So that's where we're putting our effort in an authoring platform right now.
Very good. Thank you, Bill. I appreciate that, and we're glad to have you back. But with that, I am going to make note of the fact that it's 1 o'clock. In fact, it's 1 after 1, as per my clock. And with that being said, that's going to be the last question that we're going to have time for today. There are a couple more here, and we will get back to you via email and answer your questions within the week, but we'd like to invite you also to help us make improvements to this webcast and webcasts like these. So when you sign out of your webinar, you will get a brief survey, 3 questions. All you need to do is answer a couple questions for us, and it helps kind of direct us as we move towards future presentations. So we'd like to thank you today for attending our webinar panel, The Essentials of Analytics in Online Higher Education. Also, just a reminder that this webinar will be available to you on demand starting either later today or tomorrow, so please watch your inbox for details. And then a final thank you to Bill Jerome, and of course to Dr. Marie Norman of ACOTAR, and to all of you for taking time out of your day to participate. I'm Sharon Schwarzmiller. Have a great day.